Hello everybody. It's Popsy's turn to tell a story today, and it's called Perfectly Norman. So here we go.
Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome. This is a story about a boy called Perfectly Norman, a bit like me, perfect. Norman had always been perfectly normal, until one day he grew a pair of wings. Well, I never. Norman had imagined growing taller, or growing a beard, like Uncle Mark, but he never imagined growing a pair of wings. Still, there they were now, so he decided to test them out right away. Soon Norman was swooping around, generally having the most fun ever. But then, something's always going to spoil it. He had to go in for dinner. You see, Norman had always been so normal, he didn't know how his parents would feel about his extraordinary wings. "Dinner, Norman!" As he went in, Norman covered himself up in a great big coat. His parents didn't notice the wings, but they did think it was odd to be wearing a coat indoors. Bath time was problematic. So was bedtime. Fancy having a bath in your outdoor coat. The coat was hot and uncomfortable, but Norman decided nobody should ever see his wings, ever. The next day, Norman went to the park, but it was far too hot to play any of his favourite games. And so it went on, Norman continuing to wear his coat. Long car journeys were unbearable. The swimming pool was dreadful. And that was nothing compared to his friend's birthday party. The only time Norman could feel normal was when it rained, a bit like it is today. One day a boy tried to pull his coat off, but Norman had to run away, hot-faced, angry and sad. He wished he'd never grown those stupid wings. Then he saw some birds high up in the sky and remembered the joy of his first flight. It occurred to Norman that it was the coat that was making him miserable, not the wings. "Why don't you take off that tatty old thing?" suggested his mum and dad. Norman looked up hesitantly. He smiled and nodded. Norman smiled back. He threw off his coat and let his wonderful wings fan out all over the place. Norman leapt into the air. Finally, he was free of that coat. He noticed a few other children wearing thick, heavy coats of their own. They looked up at Norman and round at each other nervously. There was a moment's pause, then whoosh! The sky was filled with flying people. Flying Luca, flying Harper, flying Joshy, flying Zachy, flying Emmy, flying Thomas. Whoosh! The sky was full with flying people. Norman had never been so happy. He realised that there was no such thing as being perfectly normal unless you're Pops, and that he was perfectly normal, and he was perfectly Norman, which is just the way it should be. Thank you, and good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.